All right, we're going to start with the usual. We're going to start uploading the backdrop, setting the variables, and then we're going to get into the movement of the snake. So we're going to upload borders for the backdrop. That's going to be the backdrop we use, and the borders are going to be used to essentially put the game inside of it, right? And essentially, anytime the snake hits one of the borders, the game ends. And over here, we're going to upload all the costumes. So we have these four. We have snake head, snake foot, snake body, and hide body. Just going to upload all of those. Very nice. And obviously, snake head is the head of the snake. Snake foot is the food. Snake body is going to be the body of the snake. And the hide body is essentially going to be used to hide the bodies. All right. So what we're going to do for now is we're just going to hide all of them. All right. And then later on, we can just make them show. Very nice. All right. Now we're going to start with the basics. We're going to go over here on the backdrop. We're going to say when the flag is clicked, and we're going to start getting right to the variables, essentially. We're going to make one for the direction of the snake. We're going to make one for game ended. And we're going to make one for snake length. All right, and we're going to make sure that these are not ticked. And essentially what they're going to do is they're going to keep track of the different things that we want to make sure we keep track of throughout the game. We want to make sure that we know the direction of the snake so that we can control the direction it's heading in with our keyboard. We want to know if the game has ended or not, and if we should just keep it going or if we should display the end message. And we also need to know the length of the snake so that we can always keep track of how long it's supposed to be and make sure that we're always showing the right length for the snake in the game. All right, so obviously we need to, anytime we click the flag, we need to set all of these to the default. So we're going to start by setting them all to default. So we're going to say game ended is 0 because the game is now going on once the flag is clicked. We're going to say the direction is 1, right? So we're going to assign 1, 2, 3, 4 to 4 different directions that the game can go in, and we're going to define that later. But for now, we're going to say the default is 1. And we're going to set the length of the snake to 2 to start with. All right, so that's going to be the defaults. And of course, we just talked about how we want to make sure they're all ticked off so they're not being shown. All right, now we're going to move over to the head of the snake to make sure that we can put into place all the other stuff. So once the flag is clicked, we first need to make sure that the snake head is being shown. All right, so we'll go over here to show. And therefore, we need to make sure that it's placed in the right position. So we're going to put to go to x0, y0 so that it can be shown there. All right, and of course, we need to point in a certain direction. So we're going to say point in direction 90, which means that it will be pointing towards the right to start with, so that once we start moving it, it moves in that direction, right? And of course, we could have set this to anything we wanted, but I just think that's a lot more natural looking if the snake starts moving towards the right of the screen, rather than if it started going up or down, that would be a little weird. So I just think it's a little bit better to start it this way. All right, and of course, game ended is set to 0, so we're just going to set it over here as well. And again, we made sure that everything is ticked off. Now what we're going to do next is we're going to actually learn something a little bit new, something that we haven't done before in Scratch, and that's make a list, right? So what is a list? Essentially what a list does is that it allows you to keep track of a lot of information in a list format, and it just makes it a lot easier to keep track of a lot of things. All right, so we come down here, we click on make list, and we want 2 separate lists, one for the X of the bodies, so we can have track of all the X values for all of the parts of the snake. So we'll just call it snake body X. And another one for the Y's of all of the parts of the snake. So snake body Y is going to be the next one. All right, so as you see, we have 2 different lists, and anytime we produce a part of the snake, it's going to be recorded on this list. So for example, if we produce one at 0 of 0, it will show 0 over here, 0 over here. If we produce another one at, let's say, 10 20, it will show 10, 20, and that's how it works, right? So for now, we're just going to take him off because we don't want them to be shown in the program, but I can just switch it on later on once we get the program running to show you how it's saving the information in the list. But for now, let's just take them off. And essentially, once we finish the program, we want them to be ticked off. But I'll just show you how they work a little bit later. And we want to make sure that anytime we run the program, because we're setting it to the default should be that the list should be empty because we're starting out a new game. So it's important that we first go ahead and make sure that we delete everything in these lists that was saved from, let's say, the last time you played the game. So delete all of Snake Buddy Y and Snake Buddy X. All right, so just produce those two commands over there to make sure that we are good to go. Now, the next thing that we want to work on is the direction of the snake and controlling the direction of the snake with our keyboard. What we're going to do is we're going to check every time, first to see if the game is still going on. And if the game is still going on, then we can check to see the direction that it is pointing towards and move in that direction. And anytime we hit one of our keys on the keyboard, we will be able to change the direction. All right, so we first need to have a repeat until the game ends, essentially. So repeat until game ends, or not this one, repeat until game ends. All right, so we go to operators, we say repeat until game ended equals 1, which would mean that the game ended. All right, so until game ended equals 1, we're going to wait a fraction of a second. So let's say we wait 0.1 second. And then we're going to move, right? And now just to make things easier, we're going to create a new block. We're going to name it move. And we're just going to put that there, all right? Say move. And we're going to define what move is over here on the side, just so we have a little bit of a clearer picture. So what we're going to have is we're going to have 4 different conditions for each of the directions that the snake could be heading in. All right, so the snake is going to be heading either right, left, up, or down. So we need to check for all of them. So we'll just put in 4 different ifs, which is 4 different conditions. And we're going to check for every single one of them. So we'll say, we're going to also put in the operators. So the operators are all equals. I'm just going to put 4 equals. We're going to say, hey, if the direction is 1, then do whatever you have to do there. If the direction is 2, do whatever you have to do there. If the direction is 3, do whatever you have to do. And if the direction is 4, do whatever you have to do. All right. Now let's go right into every single one of them. So if the direction is 1, we're just going to say that's the right side. Because remember, we wanted it to start pointing towards the right, and we set it to start as 1. So 1 has to be the right side. So anytime the direction is 1, we will move, or I should say change the X by positive 20, and it has to be positive 20 because of the size of these costumes that we have. If you look into them, they're like 19 or 20, and in fact, the red one is 2020. The green ones are like 1918, and the reason why they're not quite 20 is so that we have a little bit of a gap between them, so it's not like all connected to each other. But essentially, we want them to be moving as 20 because of their size. So if the direction equals 1, that means we have to change the X in a positive sense, so we change it by 20. Now, if the direction is 3, that will be the left side. So we're going to change the X by negative 20. Right? Simple as that. If the direction is 2, that will be pointing downwards. So we're just going to change the Y by negative 20. And if the direction equals 4, we're going to change it by positive 20. All right. So now that we have all of this set up, essentially what we're doing is that until the game ends, we're waiting 0.1 second, and then we're moving in the correct direction, right? According to whichever direction we're in. Now, the next part that we need to make sure we have set up is the ability to change the direction. So we're going to go back to the backdrop, and forever we're going to check and see if the keyboard has been hit. And if it has, then we need to adjust the direction accordingly. So we're going to say if, again, 4 different conditions for each of the keys on the keyboard for the direction purposes, right? So if, and we're going to use a couple of different things because we need to first make sure that the key has been hit, and we also need to make sure that we're not going in the opposite direction. So let me explain this before I start putting this stuff in. Essentially, let's say you're moving towards the right, right? Now, when you're moving towards the right, you can't change the direction to left. You can only change it to up or down, because if you go on left, you essentially turn on yourself, and you can't do that, right? So in the game of Snake, whenever you're going in a direction, you can go in 2 other directions, right? So if you're going right, you can go up and down. If you're going up, you can go right or left. You can't go back in the same direction. So we need to check 2 things. If, let's say we're going right and I hit a key, we first need to check what key was pressed, and we also need to make sure that you're not going in the opposite direction in order to change the direction in the same manner. So we're going to use an AND operator over here. And we're going to first check to see if the specific key was pressed. So we'll say with the right one. All right, so if the right arrow key is pressed, and we need to make sure we're not going left when the right arrow key is pressed, because if we're going left, then we're not allowed to turn back in the same direction. So if the right arrow key is pressed and we are not going right, which would be, or we're not going left, I should say. We're not going left, essentially meaning that our direction is not equal to 3. Then in that instance, we are able to change the direction to the right. So we can change direction to 1, or set direction to 1. All right, so hopefully that made sense. Now we're going to apply the same logic for every single one of them. So we'll go over here and we say, again, we put an AND, we'll put a NOT, and we'll say if now the down key was pressed, and our direction is not 4, because remember that's the up direction was represented by 4. So if our direction is not 4, then we are able to set the direction to 2. Next up, we need to check that if the left key was pressed, so again, the same setup, and not equals, and let's just do this for the next one as well, and not equals. All right, so now if the left key was pressed, and the direction is not towards the right, which would be equals 1, then we're able to change the direction to the left, which would be set direction to 3. And the same thing for the last one. If the up key was pressed, and our direction is not down, so our direction is not equal to 2, then we're allowed to set the direction to 4. All right, so essentially what this does is that it makes sure that anytime its key is pressed and we're not going in the opposite direction, then we're allowed to change the direction to that direction. And obviously, if you were already going in that direction, then it doesn't make a difference, right? Because you're already going in that direction anyways. So we're going to go and run it and see how it looks like. So once I run it, I want to just see that the one square appears and it goes in the direction that I tell it to, right? So we still haven't programmed the functionality of the snake itself, but the snake head should be moving according to my keyboard. So if I press up, press left, press down, and it's moving exactly how I want it. And this is exactly what I want. And I'm going to test going the opposite direction, and it's not going to work, right? So I just pressed up and it didn't turn. That's very important. Let's test it one more time. I'm pressing left. It's not turning. Very nice. Now I'm going to press left and then press, or let's say I'm going to press down and press up. It's not working. Very good. And it's good to check for all directions. Now I'm pressing right. It's not working. Very good. And now let's try it going up, down. It's not working. Very good. Okay, so right now we have programmed it so it changes direction except for the opposite direction, which we don't want it to do. All right, so that was it. That was it for this video. We have programmed the movement of the snake head properly, and it's good to go from this stage. Now, what we're going to do in the next video is we're going to focus on building the body of the snake and making sure that we spawn the food, and we're moving the body correctly, and we're adjusting the length, and we're checking for the length, and we're going to do all that stuff in the next couple of videos. So join me in the next videos to do the rest of the project.